Hi, this is Korinne Carpino. Thanks so much for joining me today. Part of the Alcoholic Arts Society May Challenge is all about springtime flowers and butterflies and dragonflies and everything kind of bursting alive in spring. And so today we're going to be working on this little spring flowers with a little tiny butterfly. It's kind of whimsical. And I'm going to show you how to do that. My 5x7, I've actually cut down. So I'm going to put it on a greeting card, but it would look great framed too. So all of the supplies I use will be down below in the description box, as well as a link to the society. Feel free to take a look around. We are running a summer special right now. So take a look if you're an alcoholic artist or you'd like to be, see what we have to offer. Okay, so let's get started on our painting. Okay, I've got a 5x7 piece of Nara paper and I just put some blending solution on the paper, rocking it around. This is the Ranger alcoholic blending solution. And now I'm going to get some sailboat blue ink, very wet, and just kind of lay it into the sky area, adding a little bit of aquamarine. And I'm using just a 4-inch brush. Moving this around just a little bit, and then my intent is to let this kind of flow and dry naturally and create its own textures. Now I want to create some background meadow kind of effects, and so I'm adding some raspberry, a little bit of butterscotch ink. These are all Ranger colors. And I'm just kind of randomly dotting them in because the ink's still moving a lot. And now I'm adding a little bit of Valencia. It's a nice bright orange. And again, just letting the inks move, create their own pattern. This is just background. And now I'm just tapping on my brush, sprinkling a little bit of the ink that's still left on my brush around the painting, kind of breaking up some of these big areas. And now I'm adding some meadow green ink in the bottom, kind of like the base of where my flowers are going to go, or the base of my meadow. And then I'm going to add, this is limeade ink, just a little bit lighter color, so that we have some different values. And again, sprinkling whatever's left on my brush and breaking up the inks that are there. Next, I'm going to bring some of those warm flower colors into the bottom as well. So this is a little bit of wild plum, and I'm going to add some more of that Valencia. Again, just kind of sprinkling it through. And I want this to all kind of, it's moving still, and want it to all kind of create its own effect as it dries. So the ink's still moving quite a bit. It's a very humid day here. And so it's staying wet longer. It gives me the opportunity to pull this credit card through, just the edge of an old credit card or key card, and move some of that ink from the bottom, that green and orange and pink inks, up into the top and just create these little lines that hopefully, when it totally dries, will stay. And it will look like some stems and things happening in the background. I'm going to get a few more of these lines in while the ink is still wet. And then I'm going to splatter some meadow ink down into the bottom and add some more texture there. Now, if you look closely, you'll be able to see that because of the humidity, there's little dark spots forming in some areas of my painting, and I'm just going to have to um, roll with that and make it part of the composition. Here again, I'm splattering, but I'm tapping on the back of another brush so that I can control where it's going a little bit more. And just making some really organic kind of leaf shapes down there. And a few more splatters. So my background's done and I'm ready to put some flowers in. I have a napkin, kind of a dinner napkin, so there's no texture on it. And I have a damp brush. And I'm just going to start to kind of sketch in where my flowers are going to go and remove the ink from the paper. So as I'm using Nara paper, you can see I can remove the ink right back to the white paper. And I'm just getting in some petal shapes. And I'm just going to refine the shapes a little bit. I always like to start a little bit narrower and then work out thicker because you'll see a little bit later on in the demo where some of my petals came out a little thick and then I had to, or a little wide, and I had to really kind of work with that to bring them back in. Um, so I'm going to do three of these kind of cone flowers, and mine are going to be yellow today. They come in all different colors. And right now in my garden, I've got some cone flowers in flower and some pretty little pink flowers and some white daisies. And that's kind of giving me the inspiration for this piece. Okay, so we'll just continue now to remove ink. Notice I'm constantly wiping my brush as I work um, to remove the ink from the brush. And the bristles of the brush are just damp. And that way I can control how much ink is removed. So I'm just going to finish up putting all these petals in and getting another flower going and creating that composition. The other thing to note is as I'm creating my composition, if you can visualize this painting with a grid on top of it, you'll note that my main flower is on intersecting lines. This will help the viewer's eye move around the painting, as opposed to if my main flower was right in the middle, um, there would be no place for the eye to go. So we're going to just continue now to um, clean out these petals. I want this flower facing in the opposite direction. So it's going to be facing to the left. I have one facing to the right, one facing kind of upwards, a little bit to the right. So this adds interest as well, with all the flowers not facing in the same direction. So it's time to put in some supporting flowers. And I've chosen some pink, kind of almost a daisy shape. I'm going to switch to a Filbert brush. I think this is a number 8. And so a Filbert just has a rounded tip. Again, the bristles are just damp. And I'm going to use the shape of the brush to help create the shapes of the petals. Just cleaning it out. And I think I'm going to go for 6 or 7 petals on this flower. And you can see just some simple shapes. Now, the reason I'm pulling the ink out of the petals before I paint them is if I paint right on top of my background and don't do that, I am going to end up with some mud. The inks are translucent, and so they are going to just mix together um, with the fluidity that I'm using them at. And I'll just end up with brown because I've got colors on the opposite side of the color wheel. Or when I put my yellow for my yellow flowers onto that blue background, they would end up green. Um, so it just takes a second to remove the ink and will give me that effect I'm looking for of colors layered um, on colors. So here we're just adding a little bit of raspberry ink, and I'm going to start by just filling in the white areas and come back and add texture later. The inks are wet enough that they're moving as I put them in the space, but not so wet that they're actually moving outside the lines of the sketch there. Now I'm adding some shade darker. This is wild plum ink into the petals of this flower. Notice I try to move around the flower as I'm filling the petals. Um, and I'm careful when I'm filling petals that are next to each other so that the ink doesn't spread too far. Next, I'm going to go in with just a damp brush. So the bristles are just damp, pulling that ink back a little bit towards the center of the flower, giving it some texture, lightening it up a little, and creating some dimension by doing this. And I'll do this one more time. And now I'll come back and use the same method in this other flower. Let's just pull a little bit of that ink back, create some texture, create some dimension. Now I'm going to come back in with probably a little bit drier ink. And you can see I'm just adding some more dimension to these petals by darkening one side of them, darkening the center or the petal towards the center of the flower. Just want them to not look flat. I'll do the same thing here. A little bit of darkness around that flower center. And I need to wait for the inks to dry to add another layer, so that's why I'm working back and forth between the flowers. And you can see I can add a nice dark layer of ink there. And we'll darken this other one up as well. Okay, next I'm going to work on my yellow cone flowers, and I'm going to be using three colors. This is sunshine yellow, and just kind of putting my base coat of some ink on those petals. And we'll finish with that base coat. Ink is wet enough that it's moving a little bit when I put it down on the petal, but dry enough that it's not flowing outside it. Coming in now with a little bit of dandelion ink. It's just a brighter yellow, um, and kind of brightening up the ends and one side of the petal. And now I've got a damp brush, just damp bristles, no ink. And I'm just coming in and blending and lightening. Okay, I've decided I want to give a little more depth to the painting and make the yellow flowers look like they're in front of the pink ones. And so you just saw me wipe out the ink to create another petal. And now I'll just add that brightness on the edge. And that effectively adds kind of that layered look like the yellow flowers in front of the pink one. Okay, we're going to start to add the sunshine yellow ink again, adding a little bit of butterscotch in here as well on this one. It's facing to the left, it's outside of the light a little bit around that area. Coming in with a little bit of the sunshine yellow. And you can see the way I'm using my brush. I'm really looking to create texture in these petals and not have them flat. Getting a little bit of butterscotch in there between those petals just a moment ago. Okay, getting a little more yellow in this one. And a little bit of butterscotch up in the top of these. And then we'll get our dandelion um, and brighten the edges of these petals up. And then we have to finish this other one. Okay, we'll get a little bit of yellow in there. And then I'm just using a damp brush again to blend. Now I'm starting off with butterscotch in this one. And then I'm going to move to my sunshine yellow and just fill that in. Leaving room for where my dandelion is going to go, and then I'll be able to blend. So all of the work I'm doing here with the blending and using the three different colors of ink is really to add dimension as well as texture so that these flowers don't look like they're laying flat on the page. Again, just damp brush, no ink on the brush, and just brightening these up a little bit. Okay, adding a little bit of a line around the base of the seed head. So it's time to add stems for our pink flowers, and I'm going to use lime green ink. I want it to be contrasting a little bit, different value from the stems on the daisies. And I'm just using a liner brush and fairly dry ink. And this flower looks like it's leaning to the right to me. So I'm going to put a curved stem. And I'm coming right down through the background a couple of times. Now I'm using a micro dental tool and some butterscotch ink, and I'm just tapping in a circle around the outside of the center of the flower and creating some texture there. Just little dots of fairly dry ink. And then I'm going to come in to the center, to the very center, with some dandelion ink and create some brights. A little more dark going in. So I'm going to move back and forth between darks and lights as I build these up. And I'm also going to use just a damp um, microdental tool to lighten up some of the inks. It'll get to it to move a little bit and lighten up some areas. Now with a clean microdental tool, I'm coming in with pitch black ink and creating the seed heads on the top of the cone flowers. Notice I'm using a slightly curved, or I'm following the curve of the seed head as I put these little dots in. Again, creating dimension. Now I'm going to come back in with this microdental tool that's just damp with a little bit of alcohol on it. And I'm just tapping it around. And what it's going to do is break up the inks that are already there, create some areas that are of different values. So I'll have different shades of gray and black. and it creates that dimension that I'm looking for in the seed head. And if I need more darks, I can come in as I am now with a little bit more black on that micro dental tool. So these little tools come in different sizes. They are disposable. The heads are fairly fine, just have a little bit of kind of a little bit of fuzz on top of them, just enough to hold a little bit of ink. And you'll see people use them a lot of times for flower centers because it does create these lovely little dots. Just adding a little light now in the areas that would be facing the light, getting a little more dimension going. I just pulled out a little bit of color there, and I will add a little color back. It just seemed very dark in that area to me. So once I get these seed heads done, we will move on and do some leaves. Just watching how it's drying and refining the shape a little bit. Now I'm coming actually back with a little bit of butterscotch ink on my little micro gentle tool, and I'm just adding a little bit of color around the base of that seed head where the petals connect. Give a little more dimension there as well. Okay, it's time to start leaves, and I have just a small round brush, and the leaf shape is fairly easy to do. It's just wider at the closer to the stem and comes to a point as we move away. I do have a little bit of a stem coming off the main stem for the leaf to sit on. See, let me put that little bit of a line in there. And so first I'm just going to fill these with this dark everglades paint ink. And then we'll come back and create some light in them. So my ink is fairly thick. You can see it's not moving a lot as I put it down, doing my outline and then filling in. So this is instantly now pulling this area together and making those yellow flowers much more noticeable as the major flowers in the painting. And because those leaves also overlap the stems of the pink flowers, it gives us a sense of depth that the pink flowers are behind the yellow flowers. So we'll just finish filling those in. I'm going to make the left-hand side of the stems a little bit darker. You can see me pulling down that one side. And now I'm just going to, I pulled in so you can see a little bit better. Now I'm just going to use that limeade ink. And I'm going to do some really kind of sketchy leaves. And I picked a green, the lime green, that's a different value from that dark green in the front. It's a different value from that medium green in the back. Again, to try to add the sense that there is dimension to the painting and the green behind these leaves is truly in the background. So I'm just going to sketch in some leaves and work to add some lights to them. Um, they really don't have a lot of defined shape. It's like leaves from my imagination. And that's okay because this is just a little whimsical um, flower meadow. I was just using a damp brush to lighten it up a little bit. I'm going to add a leaf, some more leaves behind these dark leaves. Again, using that lime green, I am picking up the ink behind because I'm adding a lighter color on top of what's there, and I don't want it to mingle together. Again, small round brush and just kind of dropping some ink into those areas. Coming back in with a damp brush, breaking up the ink a little bit, giving it some texture and light, and adding a little light with just a damp brush, pulling it through these other stems. I'm also going to use a damp brush and just pull back a little bit of the ink in these darker leaves and just give them little highlights. And we'll use the limeade ink and come back through and just create another stem in here, just to kind of balance it out. You can see me removing ink because I was putting down that limeade and it was mixing with what was underneath, and I just needed to get that out of there. Okay, so we're almost done. Add a little bit of lightness here. And I'm going to add a little butterfly. So I have a stencil. Unfortunately, my camera like quit on me as I was doing this, but I'm going to lift the ink out of where that little butterfly is on top of that cone flower in using that stencil. And then I'm going to paint it back in. Now I'll show you what I used in a moment. I did use lift ink. And that just helped me remove the ink in the stencil. So here we are with the butterfly painted. I just used the Valencia and outlined it in black. Kept it really simple and whimsical. Again, my stencil. This is the alcohol lift ink that I used to take the color out. And there you have it, some whimsical May flowers. So I hope you enjoyed this demo, and I can't wait to see your May flowers. Happy inking!